Hello and welcome to the Anime and Manga Club podcast, where we talk about anime, manga, and all other Japanese media. I'm joined here by Tom, our advisor, and we are going to be talking, obviously, about anime and manga. But first, I wanted to speak about the beginnings of our club, since this is the first episode, and it'd be nice to have that on record. So this club started when I got an idea to have a special activities club here at JJC. I got the idea from student government, actually, where they were just spitballing a bunch of random clubs. And from that, I actually got the idea to start one myself, specifically about anime and manga. Because, I love those two things, and I was actually surprised that there was no club already on campus. From that, I made I went to Main Street, surprisingly, that year, the fall 2022. I was surprised I actually got a table, but, you can actually get one pretty easily if you just show up correctly. So I collected a table. It was a very barren, empty wasteland of a table. It was only me, probably my phone, me eating ice cream, and like a sign that I just made using like a laminal thing, using another club's activity that they were doing. So I was just sitting there awkwardly. And from that, it actually got pretty popular. People came in, they said hi, they wanted to join the club, and I eventually added them all to a public chat where we all got to know each other until eventually we kept meeting up every so often in the cafeteria to eventually getting chartered in spring of 2023. The club has been running strong since then. We have a usual member count of like 10 people, 10 to 12, and I'm very proud of the club I've made, basically. So, yeah. The second question I wanted to ask was regarding how you and I met, since I think it was a pretty interesting story. So I'll bring in my background first. You need an advisor to start a club here at JJC. If you don't have an advisor, you can't start a club. So during that time period between fall and spring, I was basically looking around for any advisor who would be willing to, or not advisor, but really professor or staff who would be willing to take it. But eventually, what I found was when I originally did the Main Street, Tom came up to me, and I eventually took him as my advisor, since it's actually kind of difficult to find people to advise for your clubs if you're just starting out. Would you want to tell the story?
Sure. So basically, I was encouraged by my manager. First of all, my name is Tom. I work in the bookstore. I'm one of the 4 full-timers in there. I am the inventory control clerk. That sort of explains my presence on campus. I'm in my 5th year here. So last year, my manager encouraged me to go take a walk down the concourse and see all the activity going on with Main Street, because all the clubs are there, and I'd never done it before. I'd never walked down there during those events, and I just decided to go ahead and take her up on her advisement and take a walk down. Walked all the way down to the end. Saw some interesting clubs. The gaming club, they seem to be very active amongst clubs that are in my area of interests. So I talked to them for a little bit, and on the way back, I saw you sitting at a table by yourself. All the other tables had these decorations, and it was all very fancy and made up, and you're just sitting there by yourself, just there's nothing produced about it. It's just you with a table and some pieces of paper, and I'm like, what is going on here? This is kind of interesting to me, So I asked him, it's what is this? And he just kind of puts his hands up and he goes, anime and manga. So at that point, I was really surprised, because I never thought that in this era where anime and manga are such foundational cornerstones of our pop culture consumption, that we didn't have a club here for it. So I was really surprised. So I talked to you a little bit about it. I found out that you were looking for an advisor, and I basically said, hey, look, it's not really something that I think I'd be able to slot time for reliably because, there's other things going on in my life that might prohibit me from being able to do it. But if you can't find anybody else, come and find me. Well, a few days later, he's like, hey, I could still use a help with the advisor. So I just decided to go ahead and jump into it. Had a conversation with my wife about it. I said, look, this is something I think I need to do. Anime and manga have to have a presence at JJC. There's a lot of young people that are fans of it, and they don't have a place. The college should give them a space where they can talk about it, and that was kind of how it all began. So from there, I found out you were involved in a lot of other stuff going on campus, and I was very impressed with how involved you were with a lot of different things. There's a lot of ambition there, but you were also kind of like soft-spoken, and you're kind of funny in an unassuming way, and I thought that was like, it was charming in its own particular way. I'm like, I think I'm really gonna like this kid. So here we are, and now we're a year later, and we're doing a podcast. So that's the story. Not as funny as I've been before we started shooting, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Sure. I didn't acknowledge it at first, but there is a certain level of iconic, apparently, that I had at that Main Street table at Fall 2022. People will, I've heard like stories after the fact of people being like, yeah, that was like very interesting that you just had like nothing on your table and it was literally just you.
How interesting that was the one that stood out to me.
Yeah.
Right? That was the one that just like, that table is the only, like, and I'm not trying to denigrate any other clubs, but there's something unique going on here. I just see one person with a desire to do something with almost no support, and I love that. I love that pioneer spirit. I love that entrepreneurship. So,
Yeah, I've heard, I think 2 stories so far of people being like, yeah, I was like walking down on the Fall of Main Street 2022 and I saw you just sitting alone, like eating ice cream and like being by yourself at this table. And I just thought that, looking back on it, I was thinking like, in my mind space, I was like, I need to get as many people as I can. I need to make sure these people are passionate. And like, I was like trying, like, like acting my heart out of like, hey, I want to do this. This is what we're possibly going to be. I hope you'll support it. And I like that idea that in the third person, like other people walk by and at least saw that and acknowledged that as like there's something interesting happening at this particular area at Main Street.
When I told my wife about it, I actually told my wife this very same thing. It's like, there's just Andrew, who I didn't know who you were at the time. He's just sitting there by himself, and she kind of likened it to there's this like garden of like all these like very colorful flowers, and then in the middle of it all, there's just like one solitary flower like budding, and that's the one that stands out because it's so different from everything else. I mean, all the clubs are different in their own way, right? Like each one of them has a subject or an area of discourse, but like you were just there, like waiting to sprout, and that I thought that was, there's kind of a beauty in that, right? Like you're just trying to start something new in what is a crowded field because you got to compete with so many other interests, right? Like, you can't be in all the clubs, and then people have jobs, people have school, people have lives. So here you are trying to start something new in the middle of all that, so yeah, it's remarkable, so I'm proud of you, kid.
Thank you, Tom.
I know that means so much to you.
Well, I mean, I respect you, so I think it does mean something to me at least.
No, I don't know how to feel about that.
Okay. Sure. Anyways, my third question was actually going to be regarding the A&M Club's events. During the first semester, we were actually active the spring 2023. We didn't really get to do anything because I was still working out how to be an effective club leader and how I wanted the meetings to be structured and all that. So I didn't really get to actively like go out and do stuff because by that point it was a little bit too late. But now I wanted to speak about, or at least ask the question of like what A&M club event that's possibly going to happen that you're most excited for, and what are you basically looking forward to the most?
Well, the one we've been talking about quite a bit, if I can bring it up, is the trip to Mitsuo Marketplace in Schaumburg, Illinois, or maybe it's Arlington Heights, whatever. They're like neighboring, so I'm really excited about that because I've been going to that place since the early '90s when it was called Yaohan. Of course, a company came in, bought it, they changed some stuff around. I mean, it's essentially like a shopping center. It's like a mini mall. And there's a grocery in there, there's a pastry shop in there, there's a food court, there's a bookstore, there's a travel agency. There's been all kinds of other things. And when I went there originally, there was a toy store in there. And they were selling Gunpla back in the '90s before it kind of blew up into what it is now. So, we would come back with our Gunpla and everyone would be like, well, where'd you get that? And I'm like, oh, well, there's this really cool place you need to go to. Well, here we are now, 30 years later, right? And there's still so many people that are younger people that are fans of anime and manga and just Japanese culture in general, and they've never been there. So for me, the thrill is going to be watching those young people walk into that place for the first time and to try not to lose their minds because, you walk in and just to the left, there's Kinokuniya Books. And you could spend, for someone who's never been to Mitsuo before, you could spend a whole day in there because they got everything. They've got manga, they've got stationery, they've got toys, Gunpla. They've got all kinds of little knickknacks and tchotchkes and whatever other old words I could throw at it. But yeah, you could spend a whole day walking up and down inside those or up and down those aisles and looking at everything. And then, and that's, to me, that's going to be the thrill to kind of relive my memories of first going there through this new generation of fans that have just never seen it before and never been there. A little anecdote of my friend Scott, when he was in the JET program, he came back after 5 years because, you do 5 years, then you come back. And I had to pick him up from the airport, and the first place he wanted to go was Mitsuo. And I'm like, why? He said, because I already missed Japan. And he told me that basically when I go inside there, it feels like I'm there. I'm like, how is it different? He's like, it doesn't feel any different to me at all. So I really feel according to Scott anyway, you get a really good immersive cultural experience, The only thing that might take you out of it is the fact that there are a lot of Americans in there, which isn't it's in America, so you can expect a lot of Americans. But I remember when I was going back in the day, you almost didn't see any Westerners. It was almost all Asians in there, So we were kind of like the outliers. And now, as time's gone on and more people have found out about it, it's more multicultural. So. But yeah, that's the thing I'm excited about is getting you guys out there and watching you freak out about it. It's going to be fun.
Sure. I saw some I saw a little bit of pictures as I was doing more research about the field trip, and it does look pretty interesting to go and explore. There has been a little bit of complications in terms of this is my first field trip that I'm ever planning out, so there's a bunch of information that I have to know. And forms I got to fill out and make sure I do the calculations correctly. But I was hoping after our first club meeting, I got a basic idea of how many people would want to show up so that I can plan out how many people will be showing up.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to over and then I don't want to under and, under prepare, over prepare, all that kind of stuff. I kind of want to hit a nice middle.
Yeah, sure. I understand. If it's the first thing you've ever planned, you definitely don't want to take on more than you're ready to, And then as we can do more and more of them, you'll become more familiar and experienced with the process and can better plan it. But yeah, you got to get in the pool at some point, right? So.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely commitment would be something. People changing their mind at the last second. There's always going to be drop off, but. Anybody watching this, I would encourage you, if you're in the club and you've never been there, you should definitely prioritize going. It's a lot of fun if you've never been there before. I go practically every week, and it's still fun for me. So, every week, probably for 20 of those 30 years since I first went, and it's still a thrill. So for anybody that's never been there before, I strongly urge you to give it serious consideration.
Yeah. And I'm quite excited to go as well. So once I get all the paperwork filled out, I'm sure it'll be not too much more preparation. That'll be as crushing as it is starting. Rather, it's more just continuing the process that's a little bit easier for me.
Sure. The only thing I will add is that if you're planning on buying anything, make sure you either budget responsibly or you bring a lot of money, because if you're a fan of these things, you're going to want to buy a lot of it, and it gets pretty costly. So that's be aware that you're basically walking into a kind of a tourist trap of sorts.
I get you.
So.
So for me to answer that question, while I am excited for the Mitsuo Marketplace field trip, I'm more excited for basically this small idea that I have where we take a larger table out in the middle of JJC around like A building, and we sit there and we just have a bunch of manga laid out, and then we just talk. The idea being is that not only does that serve as a cool place for us to just chill out, talk, look at manga, read manga while we're chilling and talking, but that also serves to show the rest of JJC that Anime and Manga Club is literally just like a group of people just like sitting and chilling and talking about like whatever interests they have. Since it's a little bit difficult to like look at clubs without joining clubs at JJC. I would say that for clubs around JJC, usually they kind of have like big events and then their own meetings. So if you don't come to like either of those or kind of miss like both, like you kind of don't really see what they're all about. The most you get is kind of like a sheet of paper that says like their name and the advisor and the room they usually meet at, which can be cool to like have that knowledge. But I think it's also another thing to have like, a group of people there, just willing to talk and chill out.
Yeah, it's a very interesting way to sort of, I guess, market the club, to let people know that it exists and it's a place where they can go and talk about this stuff. It may be the difference between showing people a picture of a zoo and actually going to the zoo or something like that.
Sure. Very interesting comparison you're making.
Oh, well. It's probably just my old brain.
Sure. I also just like the idea of having manga there because I just like flipping through pages and looking at cool artwork. So that'd be nice to have. And also, JGC Library has a bunch of cool manga that we kind of helped get there. So it'd be cool to put that on display as like something we've already done as like a cool club thing. And
I'm still working on a couple of things with the various publishers myself. I still have some outreach to them. It was con season, so they were all very busy. But from back in my days of my youth, when I was going to conventions as a fan, and we would always go to the booths of the publishers of the day, and we were just like outlaws. I mean, we were just going there, give us free stuff, But you forge contacts that way, because especially back in the early '90s when this stuff first started coming over here en masse, there had been like sprinklings of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like we'd had Speed Racer when I was like 6 years old, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and then you had Star Blazers, and then Robotech. Robotech was the one that got me into it. I guess maybe we'll talk about our origin points later, or
sure.
not. Yeah, but like in the '90s is when it really started coming over here. That's when you actually had. I mean, we were shocked one day to see that there were companies actually distributing anime via VHS. And so then we know, okay, they have a presence at conventions. Let's go get the goods. So we would just, like a gang, we would just go from booth to booth to booth. What have you got for free? And these companies are just like, yeah, here, throwing stuff at us, just throwing it at us, because they're like, we want people to know this exists. Because at the time, it was a niche market. It still is kind of a niche market or niche market, but it's becoming way more mainstream. You go into a bookstore now, and the manga section is as big as any section in there, So, but back then, it wasn't like that. So yeah, they wanted that grassroots word of mouth. So I maintained some contacts with those people, and a lot of those people have moved on, but they know people that are still there, and they send me to other people. So it's just been con season, so it's been really busy. But I'm hoping that pretty soon I'll get some hits back, and I can see what else I can get from these companies to donate to the manga library that we have, or I don't know what the viability is of doing screenings. I reached out to G Kids about possibly either getting a copy of the first Slam Dunk or having someone come and screen it for us, but I don't know if that'll happen. They never got back to me, but G Kids is a company that didn't exist when I was doing all this, so they might be like, who's this guy? But, but I mean, yeah, so, I'm excited to contribute and add more to that library. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that definitely does sound pretty exciting.
Screenings would be great fun, I think, get to like show stuff here, but we'll see what happens.
Okay. So the next question I wanted to discuss was our first experiences ever coming in contact with either anime or manga. So you can kick us off there.
Okay, well, being an older fan, when I was very young, obviously my first experience would have been with what was on TV at the time. So it would have been stuff like, a lot of the kaiju stuff that was on TV, like Spectre-Man, Ultraman. I can't remember the name of the one, but there was like the golden robot with the long blonde hair. Space Giants. That's what they called them in America. They had different names in Japan, obviously, but like the first animated thing I ever saw from Japan was Speed Racer. I liked it not because it was Japanese, but because it was a guy driving a car that could jump over a cliff with a spring-loaded set of feet.
That definitely is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm trying to get that in my car right now. But it's a Toyota Camry. It won't be really nearly as awesome as the Mach 5.
Sure.
But anyway, from there, but I kind of watched it and then I left it behind. Same thing with Star Blazers, which is Yamato. I kind of watched it and left it behind. I was more into superhero stuff at the time, so I was reading in the late 70s and early 80s. I was really starting to get into a lot of Marvel comics, but my freshman year in high school, I was kind of starting to get bored of it, and then Robotech came on the air, and that's Macross, Southern Cross, and Muspiata. What they needed to do was Harmony Gold, whatever you think of them. They wanted to get Macross on TV. But they needed 65 episodes of an animated series in order to get syndication for it. Syndication was how they made their money. Syndication, it goes on all the different TV stations. They can sell all the ad dollars to all the different regions in America and Canada, I believe. So Harmony Gold ended up buying the American distribution rights for Macross, which now, as I understand it, are the global distribution rights for Macross anywhere outside of Japan. It's a big controversial thing because Big West is the company that kind of owns Macross in Japan. But because Harmony Gold has global distribution rights outside of Japan, Big West has never been able to release it outside of Japan. Now they've got it worked out, but I'm sure Harmony Gold's getting a nice piece of that pie, so they ended up buying two other lesser known series. And they ended up rewriting it, so it was all one generational continuous flow. They ended up with 85 episodes. They were able to put it on TV. And Robotech was the first thing that I watched where I was I want more of this. Because it was a military drama, there was war, there was sacrifice, loss of life, major characters. Imagine reading the Avengers before they were killing characters all the time. And before comic books were killing characters and then bringing them back and killing them and bringing them back. Back in the early 80s, when a character died in a comic book, they stayed dead. It meant something. So imagine reading the Avengers and Captain America dies and that's it. You never see that character again. Well, this kind of stuff happened in anime all the time. And it's probably the result of audiences in Japan growing up in the wake of World War II. So, what young audiences over there was consuming would have been vastly different from what young audiences over here are consuming, right? So the stories that the older generations would tell the kids and the types of media that they were consuming were very different and shaped by very different cultural circumstances, So, it wasn't uncommon to watch an anime back in the early 80s and, it's a war drama and a lot of people are dying in a battle and stuff. But to me, I was everybody's so safe in superhero comics, but reading this, or watching this, I'm wow, it's there's actual stakes. So I was more interested in it. Also, the procedural flow of it was very similar to a comic because it was acted out, it was animated, and there was a soundtrack, and people were speaking. I was consuming this type of thing in a whole new way. And then I just kind of like went all in on it. I left comic books behind, and just from there, so from Robotech in 1985, it's just been a steady stream of me like consuming it and just getting everything I could. Fist of the North Star and Bubblegum Crisis, and I could go on with all the old stuff that was kind of like the formative years of my hobby. And we were getting like 5th generation, raw, from Japan, VHS, tracking flaws and everything. And we loved it. We loved it. With commercials. The Japanese commercials are insane. They're like, I love them. They don't do them like that anymore, but man, they were great. But yeah, so like, we're consuming it in the way that the Japanese audiences are consuming it. Now it's like it's all, people are complaining if it's not like 1080p or whatever, it's like high def or 4K or, to me, I'm just like, man, just be happy you get it. Just be happy you get it at all, Sure. So that was it for me. So Robotech is probably the flashpoint for me. So, and then I've just never really looked back. It's kind of like waxed and waned, but yeah, that was where it all began, 1985. Yeah. 15-year-old kid looking for something new.
Yeah, that is quite the story. All that history and stuff is really interesting to me, at least.
I get a little scared that people are going to forget the roots of the hobby, and I know that's me sounding like I'm yelling at clouds, but I do get concerned that a lot of the older stuff is being dismissed, and Sure. It shouldn't be. Now I realize there was a lot of bad stuff coming out at the time too, but companies were way more selective about what they brought over here, so we were only getting that good 10%. So, and I'm sorry. Go on.
I would say that my answer is significantly less interesting. One of the first times I ever sought out to watch kind of like animation and anime and all that is getting YouTube access at a young age. So what would happen is I would be scrolling through YouTube and like these weird like 280p like really crunchy videos of like animation would pop up in thumbnails, and I was like, I wonder what this is. And I clicked and I watched, and then I just kept clicking through and watching more and more of it. And even though like it was all like super low quality, like you could see you could count how many pixels there were on probably like 10 hands, right? And then, but just like watching that, I was like, wow, this is really cool. I believe one of the first things I ever watched was Spice and Wolf, which is kind of like a semi-adventure story.
Mm-hmm. I'm familiar with it. I've never watched it, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. But watching that for the very first time via like YouTube was an interesting experience. But I think the first ever time I ever watched an anime was Sonic X when it played on 4Kids. I didn't know this until like really recently, but that apparently counts as an anime. So I would watch that every Sunday because I like Sonic and I thought he was cool.
He's cool. He
is cool. Like he would run around on the screen and I'd be like, this is awesome. And then there was one episode he turned into Dark Sonic, and that was just so cool. And I just, I was like, wow, this is amazing.
But I mean, what you're transitioning from Sonic to what you're consuming now, how did that happen?
During like the middle school era, I just pretty much like kept watching like more and more shows. Like during that time period, I was watching like To Be Hero, like One Punch Man, all like the old stuff that was like
One Punch Man old. You're funny.
At least to me, it was like one of the first things I ever watched. So it was just like enormous, like watching that, and I was like, whoa, this is awesome. And then To Be Hero being like an overall kind of gross out show to having like a really deep and emotional story underneath, really, really interesting to have as like one of your first anime you watch. I would still regard that as like a pretty decent anime, but yeah. So for our next question, I wanted to talk about animes that are upcoming that we want to actually watch when they start to come out, and manga we're actively like reading and would semi-recommend at the same time. So me going first, The most recent thing that's going to come out is the Scott Pilgrim anime coming out this November 17th.
I had no idea this was even happening.
Yeah, 2023. November 17th, 2023. That's going to be a watch party for the club. And I've kind of tried to get into Scott Pilgrim multiple times, but never really could get myself past like the first 3 episodes of like any given thing I watch, whether that be the comic or the show or movie. But at least from now, I'm glad that I'm actually going to be able to experience it through like the club and through anime. And I have people there like just confirming, just in case it's not like authentic or whatever. Late 2023, so late this year, apparently it was confirmed that Uzumaki was going to be finished up. But knowing that kind of like cool art style and like weird visuals that they're going to have to create, I wouldn't be surprised if it was pushed back to 2024. But I'm hoping that comes out. I'm very interested in that. The Dangers of My Heart Season 2. Apparently that's coming out January 2024. I love the manga. I love like re-experiencing the manga through Season 1. And I think they did a really great job. Like I'm very glad to see all these like manga I like first experienced reading them and then seeing them animated, and like seeing it done well, like Tomo-chan and Dangers of My Heart. So I'm very glad to see Season 2. I'm very excited for that one. Delicious in Dungeon. That's going to be animated January 2024. I read the first 2 issues. I think I got through half of. I think I got through like half of issue 3. I'm not sure. Like I kind of left off in there, but man, it's like a really interesting story. Like seeing that animated would be really, really cool. And knowing, was it Studio Bones that was taking it up?
I'm not sure who's picking up. I know they're doing it. Did you read Delicious in Dungeon on my recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the main reason I asked for it to be sent in. I was like, I might as well like read it, and it was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Like seeing all like the cool recipes that they're doing and all the moments. And like the characters interact with each other. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I do, and I have not read Volume 12 yet, but I've got it at home. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But when I saw they were doing an anime for that, I was pretty stoked for it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always that danger that they're not going to adapt it how you see it in your head, or that it's not going to be what you expect, and that you might be disappointed, but take the chance. It could be the next great thing. So, and it certainly deserves the attention.
Yeah. So that's that. Beastars 2024. I thought Season 2 was a little bit iffy. It didn't really capture the same feeling that I had while watching Season 1 of like a very clean and like cool drama that was happening, and more focused on like mystery and action and stuff, which is cool. I like that aspect of Season 1, but in Season 2, I just didn't think it really captured me as well. I'm kind of curious as to where they go for Season 3 in terms of story, because I like that series. It's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. The Fable. Ooh, this is a big one. Apparently, it was speculated to come out 2024. This manga follows a hitman who's completely like a weirdo, absolutely like just like a complete off the norm human being, attempting to live among normal people as he is given a little bit of like leave. And we basically follow him and his co-partner who helped in his crimes, like live out a normal life. And seeing him attempt to navigate real human interaction in a very normal way is very entertaining. As well as all the other characters and the side plots that are going on. So that, and I'm also excited for the action. I'm also excited for the action scenes. Oh my goodness. Watching like the main character go off on some people is like the coolest thing ever. And seeing that animated is probably going to be really cool as well.
Yeah, I hope they'll be able to do it some justice. I've never heard of The Fable. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
You're really talking it up. So
I think it's just pretty funny because it's just, I like weird characters, and that guy's just like the definition of like the weird character. Demon Slayer. I forgot what the new arc. Do you guys know what the arc after Swords? Hashira Training Arc. That's apparently going to be, that was speculated to be made in 2025 by just like a random person online. or not like a random publication, random article. So I'm excited for that. I mean, Demon Slayer is always good. So if you've watched like the previous seasons, then you know. Apparently this is going to be like a slower season, but apparently Mugen Castle, I believe is what it's called. No? Oh man, I'm mixing together. Infinity Castle. Okay. So Infinity Castle, the arc after that, was apparently supposed to be really, really cool. So yeah, I was excited for that. And then for manga, I'm following, it's The Dangers of My Heart, which I mentioned earlier. The manga's in a pretty cool spot right now. I'm always excited to see a new chapter come out. Chainsaw Man Part 2, really iconic manga that we have there. One of the more popular ones among like the general anime community. Like they're loving it, and I'm loving it too. It's pretty cool. The Girl I Like Forgot Her Glasses. I always enjoy seeing that's just like a cute romance thing. I like always keep up with because I like the new chapters and where the stories are going. I really like the new chapter as well. It like took a backseat off of like the romance to like focus on another person. So that was pretty cool. And then My Senpai is Annoying. It's basically the same thing I said for The Girl I Like Forgot Her Glasses. It's a cute romance thing I like to pick up, and it's pretty funny. But yeah, those are pretty much all the anime that I'm looking forward to, and manga I'm catching up on, keeping up with. Yeah. So.
Is it my turn?
Yep.
I'm not looking forward to anything.
Okay.
Well, that's not exactly true. So for me, like manga, first of all, anime is a very hard sell for me. Like, if it's not something I'm already very familiar with, or if it's not something that looks like it's just going to blow me away when I see something about it, I don't even bother with it. And the reason why is you bring it up. Well, first of all, I already have so much old stuff that I'm still reading or stuff that I'm going back and reconsuming that I don't really feel the need to consume anything new, you know, unless it's something that, again, like really, like Vinland Saga was something that I discovered and I was like, wow, this is great. This is the kind of thing I like. But anime in particular is a really hard sell for me because there's just so much of it. And I became disenchanted with the cycle where it's just like AnyTube and all of the Reddit boards and all the message boards and all the conversation is like, did you watch all these shows? I'm like, no, I didn't because I kind of have a life, you know, like I don't have time to watch all of this stuff. So what I had to do is I kind of had to silo myself away from it because it just becomes overwhelming. And I also think that when you're consuming so much of it, you start to think it's all great and it's really not, but you sort of, your vision of it, your view of it becomes distorted, right? I see a lot of people talking up a lot of anime that is like, they think it's the greatest thing in the world. Like, well, and I don't want to throw shade on Attack on Titan. I think it's a really good show for today. But like when I was consuming stuff when I was your age, it was a middle of the range. That would have been a middle of the range story. That would have been like the average of what I was consuming back in the day. Well, there's not a lot of stuff like that anymore, you know? So, well, maybe there is, but for some reason that's a breakout. And I'm not saying anything bad about Attack on Titan. I think it's a quality production, but it's like, I've seen all this before, you know? So like, it becomes a very hard sell for me on anime. But, you know, there is some stuff that I'm excited about. For example, you know, like I got done recently with Vinland Saga Season 2. Absolutely loved it. I know it's a very divisive season because they say Thorfinn doesn't do anything. They say it's like a farming simulator, but I think there are people that criticize it for that are missing the point. We talked about this at the end of last year, but you know, there's going to definitely be a third season of it. It's inevitable. So I'll be excited for that when it gets announced. The first Slam Dunk just came out in theaters. I've been waiting like a year to watch that, and I was not disappointed. It was probably the best sports movie I've ever seen, and I cannot think of a more satisfying. Like, to wait that long to see that last game adapted, it lived up to every one of my expectations, which is, for someone who's very jaded like me, that's hard to do. It's hard to, like, live up to and even exceed my expectations. I was so thrilled and pleased with that. As far as anything else goes, like, I'll watch anything that's Gundam Universal Century. I'll give other stuff a shot, but, you know, Universal Century is typically of a particular quality. So like the next time they announce like say Hathaway movie 2, I'll be like all over that. But anime is like just the kind of thing where it's more. I'll even go to Netflix, right? I'll go to Crunchyroll and I'll just like look for stuff to watch, and none of it really jumps out at me unless it's something I'm already familiar with, or unless it's something a lot. So many people are talking about, I can't avoid it, like Demon Slayer. I watched the first season of Demon Slayer. I watched the Mugen Train movie. Really liked it. It was great. The production values were through the roof on it, man. The fight scenes are just the best fight scenes. And the characters are great. I love Tanjiro. He's probably my favorite protagonist of this new generation of anime and manga. I really like him a lot. We need more characters like him, in my opinion, but I don't want to proselytize too much about that. Manga-wise, I'm always looking forward to the next volume of Delicious in Dungeon. Frieren Beyond Journey's End is one that I've talked to you guys about. I really like Frieren. Basically, it's what happens to all the heroes of an adventure story after the adventure is over. Like, what do they do? You know, and they're different. They're because they're all different races or lineages or ancestries or whatever you want to call it. Like Frieren is an elf, so she's much more longer lived. So time moves more slowly for her. So like all the people around her are aging out. They're dying. So basically it's her going back to all the places that they went to, and she's realizing, she's like sort of learning what that journey meant, because she wasn't able to sort of properly evaluate at the time, because as an elf she was so much more long-lived and these things didn't really seem important to her, but all those characters affected her in one way or another, and she's discovering that when they go back and visit all these monuments and all these places where, you know, 50 years ago they saved the village or whatnot. So I'm really fascinated in that. It's really about like mortality and what do we leave behind. So I really like this. I'm always looking forward to the next volume of that. You know, in Japan, obviously, they started up Berserk again, and you know how much I love Berserk. Anytime there's a new chapter, I'm always on that. You know, I'm always looking for all the scan sites, and then when it comes out, I'll buy it. I have a subscription to Young Animal. I go to Mitsu every other week, and I pick up a new issue. It doesn't run in every issue, but I do it to support the publication, so they'll keep making more. And then when the Tankobon gets released over here, I'll buy that, and when it gets translated, I'll buy that. But I'm always like on top of that, the next issue of that. I've been going back and reading Blade of the Immortal. I'm getting the deluxe editions of that. So Mugen no Junin is what it's called in Japan, and I really love that story. The capacity for human degeneracy. And it's not a degenerate story, but the main character, Manji, he can heal from just about any wound. So when he gets captured and the shogunate starts to experiment on him, they do some truly horrific things to him. And it's like the capacity for that sort of a human depredation, it's been around forever, you know. And I love how this, you know, if there's a will, there's a way. If they can find someone who's immortal, they will do whatever they can to extract that secret from him. And they don't care about the person who is carrying that gift, I guess. You know, even more so if he's an outlaw and they don't really care what happens to him. You just got to live through this, man. You just got to live through this. So, but for me, manga, when I go to a store, if I see something interesting, I'll buy the first couple of volumes. If I see something that has an interesting cover and I flip through it and I like the art is an important thing to me. I can read it mid-story if the art is fantastic, you know. So, you know, I always just go and hey, what's new? What's this? What's that? You know, I'll check that out, you know. So I pass over a lot of stuff, but
Sure.
you know. So anyway, that's my answer.
About what you're following.
Yeah.
Man, it probably would be better to just answer the question outright without mentioning the actual study itself, since, you know, that take a little bit more time. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Our official final question that I have written down, that is what genres do you think are going to be very popular within the next, like, 5-year span?
So you want me to answer first, and then you'll tell me what you think? Is that we're gonna do this?
Yeah.
Well,
Do you think the isekai train is going to run forever, basically?
I wish it wouldn't. I'm not a fan of the genre. I mean, I have liked some isekai shows and stories in the past. I mean, isekai is in the DNA of anime and manga, right? The first one that I remember watching that I really liked was Escaflowne. But I guess it really depends on whether or not the younger generations are going to continue to consume it at the same pace as the generation before them. Like right now, I think isekai is really big because you have a lot of like blank slate heroes, and there's a lot of wish fulfillment going on, and that's perfectly fine. I read comic books, superhero comic books for years, and that's all just wish fulfillment, right? So I think it'll really depend on whether or not the next generation looks at isekai as something to continue to consume, or whether or not they'll see it as kind of passé. Like, my dad read that. What I think is, I do think that there's something about the isekai genre that will translate very well to what comes next, and I think that's the gamification of the narrative, right? Like, so for example, like this idea that a group of adventurers will go into like a shop, and there will be magic items for sale, and they're described in terms that video game players will be familiar with. I'm selling a +3 sword, or here's a sword that gives you this buff, or here's a sword that poisons the enemy, or whatever. Like, I think that kind of stuff is going to kind of filter more and more into the popular manga, and I think a lot of that comes from light novels. So that's kind of what I think is going to carry over from isekai. You're already starting to see it, like The Wolf Never Sleeps, and Goblin Slayer, and Strange Adventure of a Broke Mercenary. Like, they're all video games, right? But the characters either don't know they're in a video game, or it's written as though the video game mechanics are just the way that world works. So it's not isekai. You don't have people from our world going into this world. That world is just like that. Even Delicious in Dungeon, it's got mechanics like that too. I like the idea that like adventurers die, and then there's like other adventurers that just go and find their bodies and bring them back to a temple and have them resurrected. Like, that's totally a video game trope, right? But then like what they'll do is they'll rob the corpses. And then they'll also, like, now the temple that raised them is like, well, now you people that we brought back, you owe us like 50,000 gold. So now they're like indentured to this temple, and that's an interesting story. That sounds like a manga waiting to be created, right? Like, we died in a dungeon, but we're resurrected, and now we owe the church 5 million gold. Like, that would be the name of a manga today. I think that's kind of where I think that stuff's going to be popular, because I think a lot of people are gaming. They're doing. I wouldn't be surprised if the whole gacha thing became, and I'm not talking about like Pokemon, I'm talking about like the mobile games coming out now, like Street Fighter Duel. I'm enjoying it. It's a gacha game, so I wouldn't be surprised if you saw more of that kind of stuff, like where that concept is sort of becoming more and more widespread. Because I think people read stuff that they do, right? Like, when it comes to like entertainment, that's kind of what I think is going to be big. Whatever the genre is, you're going to see more gamification of it. But it might move away from isekai. I don't know. But I think that, and there's always going to be a place for like high school stuff. I don't think that's ever going to go away. Yeah. That's fine, But yeah, as far as like genres that are going to get big, I can't see anything having any kind of a resurgence. Like, I don't think mecha's ever going to come back. It's always going to be a niche, unless it's Gundam, which essentially is its own niche separate from mecha. I think Gundam is its own thing. There's Gundam, and then there's other mecha. I don't think Gundam can easily be classified as just a mecha show. Sure. Because it's such an enterprise unto itself. Like, you could call Sailor Moon a magical girl show, but it's so much bigger than all the rest of them. That it might as well be its own thing. Or Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball is a shonen story, but I don't think people associate Dragon Ball with shonen anymore. It's just its own thing now, in my opinion. Sure. So anyway, what about you? What do you think is going to get big?
So in terms of genres that I think are going to get popular, I don't know how long the isekai, is that how you say it? Isekai.
Whatever you think.
I just say
I don't care.
Iseki or isekai. I don't know. I'm getting further from the plot right now. Okay. I don't know if the isekai train is gonna last forever, because while I am I do enjoy like a handful of shows from that genre. I think that there's a lot. There's a lot of them, and not in a way where it can like really transfer that well. Like for romance, like pretty much that's always going to be going on. Like more and more romance shows are going to be like out, and even if that's not the focus, it'll have romance in there because romance is obviously easy to write, and you can do a lot with like very creative characters. But in terms of isekais, it's a little bit iffy whether or not people can like become creative enough to keep on going. Like for example, one of the more popular ones is I got reincarnated as a slime, right? And that's cool. That's one of the more popular ones that got popular, and that's one we associate as a regular isekai like staple. But there's also another one I like called So I'm a Spider, So What? And in this one, a girl turns into a spider after being isekai'd to a new world. So, I mean, that's kind of like the same concept, and you're thinking of it like, oh, it's like, so I'm a slime, so what? Or, not so I'm a slime. You would compare it being like, yeah, so it's kind of like I got reincarnated as a slime. You would compare it to that even though it's like its own thing, right? And then I saw recently, all right, this is going to sound like a joke and that I'm making fun of it, but there's a new anime. I forgot the name of it exactly, but it's where this guy gets reincarnated as a vending machine, okay? And while I don't want to discount that as like being stupid, because anime is like silly in nature, right? But I mean, like we're now like in my head in terms of like isekai, I can think like, oh, so I'm a spider, so what? Is like I got reincarnated as a slime, and now I'm reincarnated as a slime is also another thing of the vending machine anime. So now we're just like, I mean, it's a cool concept, but how many more things are there to like turn into in my head?
Oh, it's quite a bit actually.
Well, I know what you mean, but I don't know. I'm kind of curious as to what, how far can we, how much farther will isekai be willing to go in terms of mangakas going out and writing more stories in that same general vein of I'm turning into something, or we have a party and it's kind of like a harem at the same time. So I don't think it's gonna last that much longer. But if it does, I mean, I don't know. I feel like we've already kind of ran through like the really popular ones.
Well, it's almost in the
high
parody
quality
stage at this point, right?
Yeah.
Which that's when the genre becomes popular. It starts out with like the earnest efforts to tell a story in that genre. Then it goes into, it becomes widespread, and then it goes into parody, and then it goes into deconstruction. It happened with the cowboy genre, for example, and now it became a niche where like maybe every 10 years you get a story about what it's like to be a cufflink, or something like that, So it might always be around, but it might fade as other things become more prominent. We're going to see that with superhero movies, right? They're kind of already drying up on the vine. They're not as successful as they used to be. They're trying to introduce all these new characters that just don't have the cachet of the originals, and nobody cares anymore, really. Like even if they're good movies, just nobody cares anymore. And I think that's maybe going to happen to the reincarnation genre, as that eventually it'll just get to the point where it's like, oh look, there's another one and another. It's like the DJ Khaled of reincarnations, another one.
Sure. It was funny you brought up like parody, because we already got like the parody of the isekai genre, that being Konosuba. Like that is one of the most popular ones, and it's a parody. Yeah. Like all the characters are like weirdos that are like general losers or can't really do that much. And how long has it been since Konosuba got like super popular? Like it's already integrated at this point. You're going to be getting parodies of like Konosuba, I feel like.
And it's going to come off as just like a cheap imitation rather than a parody, which is what it's intended to be as.
Because like that's at the stage of like isekais that we're at right now.
At what point do you even stop taking it all seriously, right? Like you could say I was reincarnated as a slime. Well, that's interesting. I'm a really powerful slime in a fantasy world, Yeah. What's it like to be a slime that can't be killed? But now, yeah, it's just, yeah, how interesting is the life of a cufflink or a street light or, a dog collar?
Sure. Like, how silly can we get without it being like, all right, this is dumb, I'm turning off the show.
Yeah.
Because, like, we have, like, really, like, genuine cool stories, like ReZero, I would say, which is, like, a really cool isekai, which has, like, cool characters, really dark themes, and an overall story that's, like, really engaging. But, maybe it's because I'm not giving too many of those, like, too many isekais, like, a chance or whatever, but...
Well, how many do you give a chance, though, right?
Yeah.
How many... I should give this a chance just so I can say I gave it a chance. At some point, you're like, okay, I want something new,
Sure.
You can only have scrambled eggs so many times before you want something else for breakfast.
Well, maybe you want, like, I don't know, deviled eggs.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
You get the point.
Yeah, for... What's it called? I wrote down something. The... a genre that I do want to that I want to blow up in the next 5 years that like gets on everybody's mind is I think getting really high quality horror would be like pretty cool because I've heard this like as a mild criticism before, but like when it comes to anime and like horror, it doesn't really seem to like track that well.
Which is weird because I know that horror is a very popular genre in Japan in film. And this might surprise people, but like for tabletop gaming, Call of Cthulhu outsells Dungeons and Dragons in Japan by like a mile. Like Call of Cthulhu is easily the most popular tabletop game in Japan, which is, it's interesting because Dungeons and Dragons is largely considered the most popular role-playing game in the world, but in Japan, it's like fifth or sixth, So yeah, horror has a place in Japan, and there's a lot of great manga out there that's horror based. Junji Ito, for example, is like the master of it, But yeah, it doesn't in terms of anime, it doesn't really seem to have. I'm sure some smart person out there will be like, well, actually, Tom, but yeah, but it doesn't.
I can think of 10.
Yeah, but I've never heard of them, and I've only been around forever. So I guess, yeah, it's surprising that it's not more popular. I don't know what the reason for that is, I don't know why.
I think it might just be like kind of like huge failures to come out of it because I think a lot of people didn't really like the original Uzumaki animated version. Mm-hmm. They thought that because when you see Junji Ito's drawing, like the only thing you see is like black and white, like this dark, like the really hard contrasts between these two colors, and making it super detailed so that everything that isn't colored it like pops, and whatever you're seeing is like super detailed. It's like really creepy in a way that where it like when it gets animated and when it goes through coloring and more focusing so that it actually shows up in the frame, it's kind of awkward looking. Right. Like for example, I think what was the story? Is it like The Lady Next Door?
For Uzumaki.
Yeah.
I think it was like his dad got obsessed with spirals.
No, it was another Junji Ito story about like The Lady Next Door. It was like this kid that would look next door. What?
I feel like I know what kind you're talking about. Like it's one where is it the one where the girl is like in her room and like her family just like drilling holes in her room just to watch her or something like that?
Oh, I don't know about that one. It's like this little kid. He just keep actively looking. He looks at his like window for his like neighbor who's like an older woman, right? And it's like it keeps building up throughout the entire manga of like what this person looks like, and then in the final like section of the manga, like you get to see her and she's like this disgusting like bubbly mess of a human, and it looks like a human that was kind of like infected by something, by like the T virus, and the way that it's drawn, it's super detailed in a way that's like really disgusting, where you can see like every detail. But when it was animated and it went through coloring and all that, and things became softer, and it was detailed, but it didn't really pop as much. It was kind of disappointing to see that and be like, well, I mean, she does look kind of gross, but I mean, it's not really that scary.
Well, there's also relatability to consider too, right? Like when you're reading the manga, you're attributing a voice to the character. The way in which that character is looking out that window every day, you're personifying it to some degree, whereas with an anime, somebody else is telling you their interpretation of it. So it might not, if it's not handled really well, it won't attach to the audience as much. And also, without getting too much into it, because I know we're probably getting pressed for time here, but there's also marketability to consider, right? Like those things are kind of like niche art projects. If you can't make a toy off of it, if you can't put it on a store shelf somewhere, it's a harder sell to a production company. You know, there has to be an opportunity for them to make money off of it beyond just the craft of the art. You know, that's what the manga is there for. You know, but like for an anime, that in '97, that was the challenge that Berserk faced. It aired at like 1 or 2 in the morning because you know they couldn't show it during the daytime for young audiences. What are you gonna? You can't sell Berserk toys to kids. It's a very violent story, you know. So like it's a very difficult sell, and a horror is a difficult sell. So you know that'd be something that like more like a movie, you know, like Mamoru Oshii directing an Uzumaki movie would be like, to me, you would find an audience for that. Rather than having something sustained, where it's like every week, tune in for the next exciting episode of Spirals, you know? You just have a movie and everybody goes to see this like 2-hour experience, and then you're talking about it for years, like it's Ghost in the Shell or something. So,
I am excited for that new version of Uzumaki being animated, though. It looks pretty cool. Like keeping that original art style, I think is going to make it weird, just because you're more used to seeing kind of vibrant colors and thin lines, and seeing it all just kind of being like, it's like a manga came to life.
yeah.
And seeing that really unique art style is going to be very odd, and I think it's going to add to the unsettling nature of the story.
That was one of the things I liked about Ping Pong so much, is how weird it looked from everything else. It like looked so different. I was just like, this is kind of neat. And I know a lot of people cased on the 2016 Berserk anime, and it wasn't good, but I like the fact that it looked different from everything else. That was one thing I can say, you know, that the way they shaded it, the cross hatching and stuff, I was like, this, at least this looks different. It's not great, but it looks different, you know. So
I'm trying to think of off the top of my head, but I don't know. Anime doesn't really seem to like scare me as much as like probably watching other stuff has. Like for example, like Mirko-san. I don't remember like the full name of that manga, but it's about this girl who can see ghosts. So she walks around, and basically they put her in it's very comical in nature. There is a sense of tension whenever you see her find a ghost out in the wild, but it's more like played for laughs rather than like an actual genuine creep factor. You could say that in like another example I think is like Dark Gathering. Like the demons and like the ghosts are genuinely like really scary. Like they should be like really terrifying to like be witness to, like either via like putting yourself in the character's shoes or just watching it on screen. But then you have this like little like how old is she? Like 7? You have this like little 7-year-old that runs up and like grabs a crowbar and like jumps up like 2 stories and knocks him on the head, and then they go into a little plushie that she tortures later. So like I mean it like the horror would be like completely is offset by like her existing, but I do like her, like Yayoi.
probably Yayoi. It sounds like an anime character in a story like that might have.
Yoya?
I don't know. It's hard to pronounce.
Ah.
Yeah. You're pronouncing it wrongly, though.
Okay, well, anyways, yeah, it's just like seeing this little girl like jump up and like plot out these like crazy plans to capture ghosts and stuff. You know, it kind of like takes away from the horror, so it makes it like a little bit less scary, because you're thinking like, man, I wonder how this like elementary schooler is gonna beat this ghost up. More like that rather than like, man, I hope this thing doesn't actually like hurt somebody, right? Yeah.
Well, that's maybe a story that doesn't exactly know what it wants to be, or maybe it knows what it wants to be and it just has a very eclectic audience.
Sure. Okay.
Anime.
Manga. I was thinking of doing like a wave type of thing, but that's okay. I think we can
Like
end
a
it off
wave,
here,
like
right?
I
Yeah,
do this
yeah.
and then
You go anime, manga. I imagine like 4 people being here. They go, like one side goes anime, manga, club. They all say it in unison, and they all have their arms. Okay. Anyways, I think we're good to end it off there.
Okay.
I think we had some really good discussions. I think it went pretty well for a first episode as well. Thank you to whomever watches this at home, and to whomever edits this. Hopefully we'll do some other episodes, maybe once or twice. It'd be cool to have like that just chilling on like a social media. So that's pretty much it. How do I sign off here?
Well, just remember, if you come to the Anime and Manga Club, you can have conversations just like this every week. Do we put our thumbs down at the same time?
Picture taken. Anime and Manga Club hosts first podcast. Massive failure. Like in all caps. That'd be horrible. Like the Blazers just you open the Blazers and see that. I'm like, oh man.
I don't know what happened, before advisor says.
I thought it was cool. Okay. I don't even know how to sign off. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Okay, that's it. Okay, you can turn it off.
Do your homework.